I need to be start doing YouTube, but it's alright. What's up, y'all? It's Super Stinson here. My name is Stefan. So, wansee Entertainment, part 36, 37. I don't know. It's too much. But I'll look this time and see. Because I was just putting random stuff. So, I'ma just, yeah, you know.
This is the story that happened to me a few years ago.
When you move out to the new house, don't forget to check this one thing. What thing?
I was studying for the civil service examination. I came up to the big city to study, and while I was looking for the house to stay, I met one house owner. The middle-aged lady was so kind, and the rent price of the room was extremely cheap in comparison with the price at that time. All of my friends opposed and said the price is too cheap. They also told me to reconsider it, but my mind was urgent, so I just made a contract right away.
Okay.
The room was pretty big, and the window was also wide enough so that I was satisfied with my room. But a few days later, a strange smell began to come up from under my bed. At first, it was endurable, but the odor was getting worse, so I couldn't sleep at all in my bed. I eventually begged the owner and ended up moving to the next room, which was far away from this room. Since that day, whoever moves to that room, they all moved out again because of the smell. A few people visited in a few days, and I heard the conversation between those people and the owner while they were taking out all the stuff and removed the wallpapers in the room. "Ma'am, we had told you that it would stink. If you'd have done what we said last time, well, you'd have spent less money." And then she answered, embarrassedly, "I didn't know it was going to be like this." They then began to remove the floor, change the cement, and finally changed the whole room completely. Until then, I thought we were just remodeling the house, but after I heard the story of the room from the other people who lived around here, I eventually realized that I was totally wrong. It is said that a few months ago, one student committed suicide in the room. And the owner at that time, she ignored the cleaning company's word that she had to reapply the cement to remove the smell that had seeped into the floor. So she just chose wiping off the blood of the body by reason that it was expensive. The cement looks hard just by looking at it, but because of the porosity, it's known that the cement has lots of small holes like sponges. But what if someone was murdered or the dead body was left unattended for a few days? When the blood or such thing flows downwards, it starts to rot inside and then stinks. In addition, if the dead body is left unattended for a few days, the waste begins to come out and the fat flows out when it starts to decay. Like the blood and the waste are hard to clean, as you know. As soon as the smell penetrates through the concrete hole, you would not be able to get rid of the bad smell no matter what you do. Therefore, it's said that cement should be removed altogether because the smell would not be gone of this kind of house. Although I wasn't staying in that room at that time, I kept feeling uncomfortable, so I eventually ended up moving a while later. I would like to say this to those who are currently looking for the new house. Even if a newly plastered house smells, or if you found any signs of partially cement floor, especially when the house is old, be careful, because I'm sure that something would have happened in that house already.
Dang. That was a good one already. Dang. This the first one. It's already turned out good. Thank you. Thank you. 3 true stories animated.
This happened to my older brother. When he was a college student, he joined a mountain climbing club. One day, he went climbing in the high mountains located in South Korea with 3 of his club members. The mountain was so high up that they couldn't climb all the way up in just a day. So they decided to stop by one of the mountain cabins in the mountainside and take a rest. It was a 2-story cabin, and unfortunately, the electricity was disconnected that day. Well, you know.
He was just talking about moving in the story. So y'all want to go move in a haunted house, being dumb, and I don't know what I don't care. I hope they die.
People usually don't go to sleep early on days like that. So my brother and his friends drank a lot of alcohol, turned on a flashlight, and accidentally lit it up towards the wall. On the wall, there were framed pictures of the first, second, and other mountain guards.
Oh no. Oh no. I bet you them pictures are live.
Everyone was giggling because of the face in one of the pictures. Then they fell asleep. The next morning, when my brother woke up, he noticed that 2 of the club members had already gone down the mountain, and there was only one left behind. He had fainted, and froth was coming out of his mouth. He looked around in confusion, wondering what was going on. He saw something he could not believe. The cabin was surrounded by small windows. Well then, what the heck was there last night if what they thought were photo frames were actually windows?
They thought that was pictures? Or they is dumb. Nah, I can't say they dumb. I can't say that. Or I got scared so quick because I thought the pictures was missing. But I did not know they was staring at them the whole time. So them 2 dudes gone. Oh my God, this gonna turn out good, guys. This is gonna turn out good.
When I was a little girl,
I cannot believe it. How you thought they was pictures? Then you could have looked at the night where the stars at, like, and then you can hear the crickets, like. But that's what I'm saying. They ain't hear that, but that is creepy though, cause it's like they thought that was pictures though. And it was 2 people, so they probably took them other 2 people while they was asleep, cause they probably can't take the other people. But when they was gone, there was a window. Oh, that is so loud.
I was scared of sleeping alone, so I used to sleep with my mom. Eventually, I had to toughen up and sleep by myself. Well, this happened when I was in high school. I had a twin-size bed in my room and decided to leave both my door and my mom's door open. Our bodies were facing opposite directions. I couldn't sleep that night, so I turned on my MP3 player and was laying in bed, listening to music. All of a sudden, I felt a little strange, so I turned my head around, and at that moment, I froze. I saw a person's foot on my mom's body. First of all, if someone gets too nervous, it's hard to look around clearly. However, I slowly looked up, and then I saw the face of the person standing on her body. Literally, someone was standing on my mom's body. Well, it was the worst thing I've ever seen. I wanted to turn my head around again, but I couldn't. I couldn't open my mouth or even listen to music anymore. I couldn't take my eyes off his face. His mouth was stretching and getting bigger and bigger until eventually it ripped right under his ear. I could see that the inside of his mouth was all red. I wanted to wake my mom up somehow, so I gathered up enough courage as I could. Mom! As soon as I yelled, everything disappeared like smoke. She ran into my room, hugged me, and reassured me that everything was okay. I was leaning on her now, so that I could calm down. Soon after, I put my earphones back in and turned on my MP3 player. And that moment was really crazy and just plain scary. All of my...
I don't know why I'm talking about this playing, But I'm just saying, when you when it goes right on the other side where you at, or in your closet or something, it's standing right by your room and all the other stuff like that, then when it get more creepy, now when you yell at somebody's name hello, who is you? Or somebody in my house, then they want to leave and then they thinking they crazy.
Files were gone. I had around 300 songs on the device, but all the songs were erased for no reason.
Oh.
I couldn't sleep at all that night and still felt bad even after waking up the next morning, so I ended up breaking my MP3 player. Well, why did my music files disappear?
We put a lot of stress on our feet. It's no wonder they ache. Introducing ArchFit from Skechers. ArchFit distributes pressure across...
I don't care about those dumb sneakers.
I used to wear a lot of wigs for my job. One day, I needed a short bob cut.
I'm feeling this story. I having a feeling something gonna happen, the weird face thing ain't gonna turn real. I having a feeling about
wig.
this story.
So I bought one and kept it at my house for a while. But then, something strange happened. The next day, my mom suddenly came into my room and said this. Hey, why do you keep calling me? Huh? What are you talking about, Mom? I haven't called you once. I replied to her, but she insisted that she kept hearing my voice. It was kind of weird, but soon I ended up thinking that she was just hearing things or hallucinating. A few days later, while I was eating dinner with my mom and watching a TV drama, we heard a small voice. Mommy! What the?
What?
I stood up, and what made things scarier was the voice sounding exactly like mine. At first, I thought I misheard it, but I kept hearing the sound. I grabbed my mom's hand, and we followed the direction the sound was coming from. As I was getting closer to the shoe rack near the front door, I realized the sound seemed to be coming from it. It was at that moment. Mom! The loud sound in my ears surprised me so much that my heart almost dropped. Well, eventually I went back to my room and fell asleep, failing to reveal the cause of the sound. That night, I had a dream. In my dream, little girls were jumping rope and moving in slow motion, like in a horror movie. I couldn't see their faces because the children's faces were all blurry as if they were covered by fog. However, as soon as I tried to reach them, they looked at me at the same time. At that moment, I had no choice but to scream. Their fronts and backs were all covered by a bob cut hairstyle. Well, I had the same dream for a few more days. My mom and I concluded that there was something wrong with the bob cut wig that I bought. Eventually, I burned the wig. And strangely enough, everything returned to normal after I burned the wig.
There you go, because they probably gone. Cause I would have seen it. I had the most. Okay. Oh yeah, it's like
My name is Nikki and I'm 19 years old. This past December, I got myself a Christmas temp job working at Amazon, helping with deliveries.
That's creepy.
It gets pretty busy around that time for deliveries, obviously, because it's Christmas. Right away, I hated the guy I was helping with deliveries. His name was Frank. To describe him, he was a bit overweight, didn't shave well, and his hair was short. I didn't like him because he was very rude and seemed like he was in a bad mood all the time. And I would be in the van with him most of the time making deliveries, and it was very awkward. I tried to make conversation with him, but like I said, he was very rude, and there was no point in trying after about 2 times. I thought about quitting, to be honest, or at least be with a different delivery driver, but I didn't want to cause any trouble. I was a temp after all and needed this job. I thought Frank was really rude and socially awkward and not a nice person to be around, but I never thought he would harm me in any way. One evening after finishing deliveries, we were driving back to the Amazon warehouse, or at least that's where I thought we were going. Frank passed the turn where we always go to the warehouse. As I said before, we didn't really speak, so I wasn't about to question him. He would probably snap at me anyway. After he continued driving, the more obvious it was to me he was taking me to another place, and it wasn't the warehouse. I finally asked Frank where we were going. He didn't snap at me, surprisingly. He just said we needed to run and do a quick errand. I was looking around my surroundings, and I could see that we were around empty fields and abandoned farmhouses. At this point, it was getting dark outside. Frank then pulled up next to a tall, overgrown, and unkempt cornfield. He said to me in a very firm voice to stay exactly where I was. Don't move. Frank then got out of the car and started walking up into the dirt road, disappearing into the dark of night. 10 minutes went by. I sat in the van by myself in the dark and had no idea where I was. My phone was in the warehouse in the locker, as we weren't allowed to have our phones during work hours, so I couldn't even go on my phone or use it as a light source. I needed to pee and couldn't hold it any longer, so I got out of the van and headed into the cornfield to do my business. After doing so, I started to walk back towards the van. In the near distance of the cornfield, I could see flashlights. 2, in fact. I found that really odd, as the whole area seemed to be abandoned. As I got closer to the van, I could hear a sort of heated argument going on between Frank and another man whose voice I couldn't recognize. I couldn't see him either. I heard the other man say, "Where is she? You said she was in the van." Frank then told the man that she was just in there, and she has to be around here somewhere. The other man said to Frank, "If we don't find her, you're a dead man." That's what those flashlights were. Those men were already out in the cornfield searching for me. I snuck off into the field, walking quickly, but as quietly as I could, the whole time crying and thinking I was about to die. After walking far enough, eventually leaving the cornfield, I ran down the side of a long dirt road. I have no idea for how long, but eventually I came across an old diner which was still open, thank God. Then the manager called the police for me. After this incident, I quit my job, but this wasn't the end of it. About 2 weeks after quitting my job, I got a call from my boss who employed me. He told me that I was the last one to see Frank, as no one has seen him since. Apparently, there were rumors that he owed people money from gambling debts, the people you don't want to be in debt with. As much as I don't like to think about it, I'm pretty sure Frank's way of paying off his debts with those people was to hand me over to those men. And what those men had planned to do with me, I never wanted to imagine.
Oh man, nah, this gotta be the best one. I'm dead serious, this gotta be the best one. So, he basically was trying to make a plan of her, trying to act like they was on, what's it called? They were trying to, no.
The next few days.
No, they were trying to seem like they was making a plan, but it was like, he lied to her, and they was gonna kidnap people, act like they was delivering people's packages. That's messed up.
My cousin used to work at a police station, and this incident is about one of his colleagues' experiences. One day, he received a call from a gas station worker that he had been robbed, and the robbery escaped shortly before he called the police. He asked the worker if he could describe the suspect, and to his surprise, he said that the person was in fact a woman with a white dress, and she has very long dark hair, and also she was beautiful, he said. At first, she came to ask for help because she got lost in the middle of the night. So I went to the office looking for my boss and told him what had happened. We then went back to the cashier together, but when we came in, she was no longer there, and all the banknotes were also not in the cash box. Since he was the only one on duty that night, he headed to the spot of the incident right away. As he drove toward the gas station, he soon entered a darkened section of the highway that was surrounded by forest. He was driving in the middle of a gloomy highway until he noticed that a woman in a white dress with a very beautiful looking was walking along the road in the opposite direction. He passed her accidentally, so he began to slow down the car and turned to check again if she's the person that the worker had described to him before. Then he turned the car in her direction, stopped next to her, and got out of the car immediately. "Ma'am, I need you to get on the car right now." As they were driving to the police station, he asked her some basic questions like why she had to steal the money or something else. However, the woman didn't say any word to all the questions while she was sitting in the back seat. She just looked at one point all the time until they arrived at the police station. Her behavior was pretty weird, so he thought that the woman might have some kind of mental problem. He then decided that he would not have any further conversations with her.
Hey, she kind of do it.
When they arrived at the police station, they started to investigate her, and all of a sudden, she said that she would return the money the next day if they let her spend a night in a prison cell. Because she kept insisting that she had nowhere to go, he and other cops were confused by her comment. But they could nothing to do, actually, so they eventually approved of her proposal, letting her spend one night. The other police then called the gas station and informed the workers that they had captured the person, and they would return the money for tomorrow. The next day, he went to visit the woman they had detained yesterday. However, he was stunned as soon as he had arrived at the prison cell. In the cell, they found that her roommate's face was all scratched, and his body was hung from a wall nail. And the bills, which they didn't see yesterday, were all tucked in his pockets roughly. The wall next to him was painted in blood, saying, "I'm returning my debt." What made him even more frightened was that the woman completely vanished. He went to the director, informed this, and they had a search around the area widely, but she was nowhere. Even today, everyone in the police is traumatized by this incident. That's what my cousin told me. How could anyone escape from a prison cell avoiding the cameras recording or anything? Eventually, they never found out what had happened that day and where she is now.
Wow. So she gonna do that at the end of the story. Ooh, what's that one?
It was my sophomore year of college. I woke up to get ready for my first period class. I glanced outside my window. There was a dense layer of fog, and I could barely see 20 feet in front of me. Something caught my attention in the corner of my eye. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. A strange man was standing in the grass outside my dorm. He was wearing a black trench coat and had a wide-brimmed hat. It was too foggy to make out any facial features of the man. I thought it was strange because he was just standing there, staring in my direction. He didn't move. My fight or flight reflex kicked in. I shut the blinds and locked my door. My roommate Jake didn't have class until later in the morning, so he was still sleeping. I heard him rustling around in bed, and I assumed I must have woken him up. I tapped him on the shoulder to get his attention. He was less than happy that I disturbed him from his sleep. I told him about the strange man I saw. He pulled his sheets off from over him, stood up, and opened the blinds. We both looked outside the window. Jake said it was probably just a business major dressed up for class. I told him, first of all, none of the business majors wear trench coats. Second of all, I've never seen a student wearing a black, wide-brimmed hat before. Jake jokingly said, maybe you saw someone from the Matrix. I wasn't amused by my roommate's humor this particular morning. I decided to just skip my first period class. I tried to get more sleep, but I couldn't. The strange man kept coming to my mind. I thought, why the hell was this guy just standing right outside my dorm? Why was he looking in my direction? And why was he dressed so weird? I decided to just wait for Jake to go to class. That way I could walk with him to campus. He noticed that I was waiting for him and poked fun at me. He said, "Do you need me to hold your hand too, honey?" I played it off that I just overslept and that the strange guy didn't faze me. Deep down, I was still creeped out and didn't even want to leave my dorm. Jake picked up his school bag and we headed out the door. Once we got outside, I noticed the fog didn't improve one bit. We started our walk towards campus. In order to get to the main buildings from my dorm, you had to travel through a long tunnel underneath a road. As we got closer to the tunnel, a bad feeling started to come over me. It was like a bad omen of what was to come. Finally, we made it to the tunnel. You couldn't see past the end of the tunnel due to the wall of fog.
Together, we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
Don't care about no stupid. Nobody don't want to down like that.
After getting about halfway through the tunnel, we noticed some movement at the far end. My roommate jokingly said, "Wouldn't it be funny if this was Mr. Trenchcoat?" I stayed silent. My heart rate started to increase. I really hoped this was just another student. The figure becomes more clear now. The wide-brimmed hat was the first thing to become visible through the dense fog. Jake and I abruptly stopped. I looked at Jake. He had a nervous look across his face. Jake was normally Mr. Tough Guy, and I've never seen him look this scared. Jake yelled, "Who's there?" The figure edged closer. Now we could see his black trench coat, but still couldn't make out his face. It was the exact same guy I saw earlier. There was about 20 feet separating us from the creepy guy at the end of the tunnel. Jake yelled again, "Who's there?" The guy didn't say a word. There was complete silence. I looked at Jake, waiting for him to do something. He was completely frozen. The sound of an alarm jolted Jake and I. The sound came from an emergency pole at the beginning of the tunnel. These poles were used in lockdowns or could be activated by students if they felt unsafe. I had never seen one go off before. The alarm was followed by a robotic voice. The strange man started to inch forward. Jack and I were both frozen in terror. I noticed something shiny in the man's hands. It was a large butcher's knife. I punched Jake, trying to knock him out of his trance, and yelled, "Run!" We darted backwards through the tunnel and back to our dorm. We locked the door and wedged our desks against the handle. Jake said, "What the hell was that?" The blinds were closed in my room, but I couldn't curb my curiosity. I barely moved the blinds to peek out of the top corner. There he was. The man in the trench coat was looking right at me. I turned my head and motioned Jake to come over. I looked outside again and the man was gone. Other students had reported this man, and that was the reason for the lockdown. I never saw him again, and pray to God I never will. I will never know if this was just a sick prank or a depraved man who actually wanted to harm people. It was my last day being a senior in high school. The year was 2016. The creepy clown phenomenon was in full swing. Creepy clowns seemed to be popping up all over the world. Most clown cases were harmless and just pranks. I was looking forward to signing yearbooks and saying my goodbyes to close friends. Who knew that my day was about to change in a way I could never imagine? Word got around that two seniors, Trevor and Noah, were planning a prank.
Why do top of their eyes, it's like light and they eyebrows like I don't care about the eyebrows, but it's like why they top of their eyeball is like
They were the class clowns of our class, no pun intended. I received word that they were going to dress up as killer clowns and terrorize the teachers. I instantly thought it was a bad idea, but I wasn't against some good entertainment. I tried to find more information about the prank, but the only thing that kept coming up was fourth period lunch. I assumed that's when the shenanigans would start. Fourth period of lunch started. There was no sign of clowns. Finally, I saw a clown. He was just outside the main cafeteria doors, hiding behind a statue of our school mascot. His appearance was so creepy. I was really impressed. I didn't really think Trevor or Noah would be that creative. One by one, students began to notice the clown. Most of the guys thought it was amusing. Some girls, however, were fearful and started crying. I looked out one of the side windows and saw another clown. This had to be it, I thought. There they are, Trevor and Noah. It was right then that I saw two more clowns. They were hiding behind support poles in front of the cafeteria. I thought this was weird, but I just assumed more people had to be in on the prank. All of a sudden, the power went out. I thought, classic Trevor and Noah, always taking things too far. The school's PA system came on over the loudspeaker. Code Black. Follow full lockdown procedures. Repeat, Code Black. I wondered if I should tell one of the teachers about the prank. I thought this was getting out of hand and was going too far. Right then, the back door to the cafeteria busted open. It was Trevor and Noah. They were in their normal school clothes. They both had a ghostly white look across their face. Both were also drenched in sweat. Noah screamed, "Killer clowns! They're everywhere!" Half the cafeteria was dead silent. Another half laughed and thought this was a complete joke. Trevor said, "This is not a joke. Clowns chased us with real knives." I glanced outside again. There were two clowns at the main cafeteria doors. Both were wielding knives. They slowly dragged their knives across the glass. Based on the loud screeching sound the knives made, I had no doubt they were real. I looked at both side exits, and clowns were there as well. There was no way out. I started to get nervous. Everyone was in disbelief as to what was happening. The door that Noah and Trevor ran through swung open again. I thought to myself, what idiots for not locking the door behind them. It was a creepy clown.
Oh my God, no.
His outfit and face paint was exactly like Pennywise from the movie It. He went over to a table full of girls and pulled a huge knife from his waistband. He began laughing in a high-pitched voice, almost as if he was crazed. I heard a loud rumbling noise. A huge SWAT emergency response vehicle pulled up right in front of the cafeteria. The creepy clown in the cafeteria dropped his knife and ran. The other clowns bolted as well. Only one clown ended up getting arrested, and it was a senior from a rival high school. I hope no one's last day of high school is as creepy as mine was.
Story 3.
I was only in first grade, but my memory of that day is still crystal clear.
Especially from the first
My
one and the
class had
second
just
one.
finished
Yeah,
lunch,
that's the first
and we went outside for recess. Our school had a massive playhouse. I was very rebellious at the time, and I hated when recess ended. When the teacher called all the students inside, I tried to see how long I could hide in the playhouse for. Eventually, I heard nothing but silence. I thought there was no way my teacher didn't notice me missing. I stood up and looked around. Sure enough, there was no one in sight. It felt awesome being alone without any adult supervision. After a few minutes by myself, I thought I should go inside. I was worried the longer I stayed outside, the harder it would be to explain myself to my teacher. Right when I was about to jump off the playhouse, alarms started to go off. Startled, inside the playhouse. I was too young to know what a lockdown was, but I knew something wasn't right. I stood up again and looked around. I made eye contact with a guy right outside the playground's fence. He was wearing all black. He started to try and scale the fence. That's when I noticed he had a gun. My fight or flight response kicked in. My instincts told me to run. I jumped off the playhouse and ran towards the exterior door. I tried to pull on the handle, but it was locked. I heard a thud behind me. I looked over my shoulder. The creepy man had just landed on my side of the fence and was headed in my direction. I began screaming.
Man, you don't kick that door.
I started to kick in and punch the door out of desperation. Finally, a teacher opened the door and yanked me inside. I noticed the teacher who pulled me in was Mrs. Jones. I was in her class the previous year.
That door too.
She led me to a classroom full of students and told me to crouch down behind a desk. I heard someone banging on the exterior door. I thought this had to be the guy with the gun.
It's like I'm talking to these people. Cause that was a smart thing what he just did. He said, boom, boom, I would have kicked that door until it opened.
The banging stopped for a brief second. I then heard the sound of a body slamming into the door. A few seconds of silence, then another slam. I waited, expecting to hear a third slam. It didn't come. About 20 seconds went by, then I heard a loud boom. The guy must have hit the door running at full speed. I heard the door swing open and hit the wall.
Hey!
The intruder was in the school. He started banging on our classroom door. With one kick, our door swung open. Mrs. Jones stood in between us and the intruder. The man pointed the gun at her head and yelled, "Where is that bitch?" Mrs. Jones said, "Sir, I don't know what you're talking about, but if you could just..." Before she could finish her sentence, The man said, "Where is Miss Julie?" I shuddered. Miss Julie was my teacher. Mrs. Jones was silent. The man said, "So that's how we're gonna play this, huh?" The man violently grabbed Mrs. Jones and pulled her out into the hallway. The last thing I saw was the man forcing Mrs. Jones down the hallway towards Miss Julie's room. We all sat in silence for what seemed like an eternity. Then we heard a loud, followed by another. I knew right then that Miss Julie was gone. Thanks for watching. You can watch a similar video here.
No.
And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell to stay tuned for more videos.
Oh, she really died, bruh. That's messed up. Alright, it's.
You can't kill me. This is my video.
You're mad! I'm back! Big mad! He's mad!
Download that game.
This is my story. I used to have a habit of grinding my teeth while sleeping. So I had a lot of arguments with my roommate about this. Of course, I felt sorry for him. So I was thinking about what to do. I finally found out that a mouthpiece would be a perfect solution. I told him in a loud voice, "You're not going to hear anything from today on." I put the mouthpiece in my mouth and then I laid down. However, he suddenly shook me not too long after. I slowly opened my eyes. The lights were turned on and my roommate was looking down at me with a blank stare. "What's the matter?" I asked. "Something's weird," said my friend. And what he said was that he suddenly heard loud teeth grinding sounds again while he was sleeping. But this time, it was bigger than usual, and it sounded more vivid in his ears. And he finally felt that he had reached the end of his patience. "I'm gonna have to kill that bastard." Literally, this is how he felt at that moment. Only thinking about that, he tried to find a knife and put it in my mouth. But it was too dark in the room, so he turned on the light to find it, and then the sound abruptly stopped. You know, when a person grinds his teeth or snores, it doesn't matter whether someone turns on the light or not. But when he turned the light on, the noise stopped, and when he came close to me, he found that I was sleeping quietly with the mouthpiece in. Then what did he hear? And the next thing my roommate says was, "It just gives me goosebumps. Hey, if I hadn't turned the lights on and found the knife, I think I would have killed you. You know? Pretty weird though, but I couldn't think of anything else."
Oh, he gotta kill the boy.
I don't know where to begin. One night I was working part-time at a convenience store. There was a small warehouse inside where you could place orders and watch the CCTVs. It was so quiet that day that I just went inside and spent time just watching CCTVs. As you see, our convenience store makes a jingling sound whenever someone opens the door. But then, I saw a boy on a CCTV. How is it possible? I didn't even hear the bell ringing. In a panic, I slowly looked out, but I couldn't see the boy outside the window. At first, it seemed like he was walking around in front of the snack bar, but he gradually came toward the warehouse where I was sitting. What the? I was terrified. What the heck is that? Then suddenly a man came inside, but I was already too scared to dare to go out. When he saw that there was no staff inside, he turned around and tried to go out again. But at that moment, I almost fainted when I saw his back. Riding on his back, the boy was staring at me. I was frozen on the spot. And after a moment, suddenly I heard a big car and tires squealing. He was hit by a car and died right away. Well, I still don't know what I saw that day.
That little boy evil. He probably turned on the card with the invisible power.
Let me tell you about my grandmother. Well, she doesn't have one finger on her hand.
Oh.
When my grandmother was pregnant with my uncle and aunt, she got her finger stuck in the cultivator's motor, and it got cut off. Also, there were a lot of bad things that happened that year, and she had a lot of people who died or were sick around her. My great-grandmother took my grandmother to a shaman's house at the time after finishing her finger treatment. Well, just as expected, as soon as they visited her, she told her about her bad luck and some other stuff. My grandmother was about to go back home because she thought it was literal nonsense. All of a sudden, the shaman stood up and yelled, "Where's your finger?" Her eyes turned white. "Oh, no! Why did you attach your finger on in that place?" My great-grandmother was surprised at the shaman shouting and asked the meaning. And then she answered like this: "That woman's fingers went in her stomach." Less than a month after leaving the shaman's house, my uncle and aunt were born. And when my grandmother saw her babies, she was horrified. Both of them were born with polydactylism, so they both had 6 toes each on one side. Well, I still don't believe in ghosts or shaman stuff, but that story really gave me the creeps.